That's the next step. We're plan to do
Very
that
good.
this.
Aloha, my name's Keli'i Akina, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Ehana Kako, which means let's work together. That's the vision of everyone in Hawaii, working together for a better economy, a better government, and a better society. Today's program, which is sponsored by the broadcast network of ThinkTech Hawaii, is entitled Why Hawaii Shippers Are Screaming About the Jones Act. Now, you may know about the Jones Act, or you may not know, but you're going to learn everything you need to know today because I've got a wonderful friend joining us, Michael Hansen. Michael is probably the most well-known and prolific communicator about what the Jones Act is, why it needs to change, and what we can do about it in the future. And so, would you welcome with me to the show today, Michael Hansen. Michael, aloha.
It's nice to be here with you, Kaylee.
Well, you're the president of an organization called the Hawaii Shippers Council.
That's correct.
And everyone needs to know that the word shippers has a very special meaning. Why don't you tell people?
Yes, in the context that we use the word shipper, it means the cargo owners, the people who tender their cargo for shipment on board the carriers of the shipping companies such as Matson and Horizon. Oftentimes people think that shippers means the shipping companies, but it's the shippers are actually the customers of the shipping companies.
And so, Michael, what that would mean is that you and I and anyone who takes a package over to the post office for Christmas or receives one, anyone who fills up a gas tank with gas that comes on ships is a shipper. So really the concerns of shippers and shippers being up in arms about the Jones Act is a consumer concern.
Exactly. Yeah, we're all shippers by extension.
There we go. Well, shippers of the world, unite. And in fact, I don't say that facetiously because I just got back a few days ago from Singapore and met with some mutual friends of Michael and mine who are in the shipping business. They're shippers with a big S on it. And we're going to share with you a little bit about those international perspectives. But first, before I go back to Michael and we begin our conversation, I want to just share with you that the issue of the Jones Act sounds exotic, it sounds legal, it sounds very far out there, and it sounds too technical to get to know. But I really invite you to listen carefully today. And today, really, we're going to put everything in this 45-minute period that you need to know about the Jones Act because it's doing some terrible things. It's time that this nearly century-old federal law, and we're going to talk about that, be revisioned. Be remodeled, so to speak, for the 21st century. And we're going to let you know about some of the ways it actually hurts every one of us who is a shipper. Now, back to Michael. Michael, you have a passion for this whole issue, don't you?
Yes, I've been in the shipping business since the early 70s. And the Jones Act was something that was a reoccurring barrier to what people might want to do.
So you're not a legislator, or you're not a public policy think tank head like myself and so forth, as I am with the Grassroots Institute. You actually are somebody in the shipping industry who knows the nuts and bolts about shipping.
Yes, I'm a practitioner, as they say.
And as president of the Hawaii Shippers Council, you've made it, in a sense, your mandate to get out there and communicate to the world about the Jones Act.
Right. We're trying to develop as much support as we can amongst what are known as the non-contiguous jurisdictions of the United States. That's Alaska, Guam, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico, all places that depend upon ocean shipping for their trade and commerce with the mainland U.S.
Very good. And so we'd have something in common with many other regions in the United States that are largely surrounded by water, but we, like Puerto Rico and Guam, are totally surrounded by water. Mm-hmm. Well, I can hear my wife right now because she's telling me, tell them what the Jones Act is. And tell them often what the Jones Act is. And I know of a few people who can tell what the Jones Act is as well as Michael Hansen. So just right there, the ABCs, the Cliff Notes. Michael, what is the Jones Act?
The Jones Act, in a nutshell, is Section 27 of the Merchant Marine Act of 1920.
So that's when it started, back in 1920.
That's when it was enacted. And basically, the Jones Act requires that a vessel, whether it's a ship or a barge or any vessel that might carry cargo, must be U.S. built, U.S. flag, U.S. crewed, and U.S. owned in order to carry cargo between two domestic points within the United States.
Okay, so let me just sum that up. We're talking about the transport of cargo between two ports within the United States or United States territories.
Right.
So anything that goes between ports. Okay, so we're not talking about from a foreign country to a U.S. port necessarily.
Right. The Jones Act is a domestic shipping law.
Okay, very good.
It does not apply to international trade.
Now, let me just modify that a bit. Legally, it doesn't apply to ships coming from overseas, from other countries, but in terms of the economic reality, you and I will talk about later on the fact that the Jones Act actually influences whether there's an incentive for those ships to come. But let's go back again to the definition. We're talking about shipping between two American ports, and there are four things that apply according to the Jones Act. Number one
is built, U.S. built.
Okay, so the ship that goes between U.S. ports must be built in the United States.
That's correct.
Number two?
Well, yeah, and built and never rebuilt in a foreign place.
Okay.
And there's a whole set of regulations
good.
regarding that.
So U.S. built. Number
Yes.
two.
And the U.S. flag, of course.
U.S. flag.
Right.
All right.
Which means it has
Owned.
to be registered as a vessel of the
Very
United
good.
States, in the same way you would register your vehicle.
Okay, good.
It's analogous to that.
Unless you're an immigrant in California, but or an illegal alien, excuse me. But in any case, number three.
Number three is that the vessel must be U.S. crewed.
Okay, the crew.
It means that all of the crew members must be American citizens. There is an exemption.
Now, all the crew or most of the crew?
All the officers must be U.S.
All right,
citizens.
very good.
And of the unlicensed crew members, 75% have to be U.S. citizens.
There you go.
25% can be so-called green card holders.
Okay, very good. And so the fourth regulation
is that it must be U.S. owned.
Okay.
And there's a little exemption there. It must be 75% citizen owned.
Okay,
so
very good.
There can be 25% foreign ownership.
Very good. But what if you have credit cards and debt, and that debt is owned by China? Does that affect whether or not you as a citizen have full ownership of this?
Actually, there's been large legal cases over who holds a ship mortgage.
There you go.
Because there's an ownership implication in terms of a mortgage and whether or not you can...
Very good. Well, you know, I'm going to just give you a preview as you're watching as to what you're going to hear later on. Michael is going to tell you how bad the Jones Act is for America and for Hawaii and Puerto Rico and Guam, in particular, places completely surrounded by water. We're going to talk about what it's done to the shipping industry. We're going to talk about how it has actually decimated the ability of the United States to build ships and have enough modern and clean and good, healthy ships out there. But first, let's talk about why the Jones Act exists at all in the first place and what good was trying to be accomplished. One of the things I believe, Michael, is that whenever we're going to deal with any issue, we have to be absolutely fair to the other side.
Sure.
You've committed yourself to fighting for reform of the Jones Act, but for a moment, let's do honor to the people who put that law into effect, and to those who continue to support it. So what is the basic rationale?
The Merchant Marine Act of 1920, of which one section is known as the Jones Act,
all right,
was passed in the aftermath of World War I.
Right.
World War I terminated in 1918. And during the period of World War I, the U.S. allowed foreign shipping into the coastal trade. And so the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, including the section known as the Jones Act, was a measure to reassert cabotage regulation over the U.S. coastal shipping.
Now that word cabotage, if we were outside of the United States and perhaps some of the former British colonies like Singapore, virtually everybody would know it. But here in the United States...
In fact, it's Portuguese and Spanish origin.
Yes. What does it mean?
And for example, in Puerto Rico, everybody knows what cabotage means. So it's not just it varies from place to place in the United States. Cabotage originally comes from the word cabo, meaning cape, in Spanish and Portuguese, and it came to be used by the French to mean transportation of cargo on water between the capes.
All right, so that's what cabotage means.
That's where, yeah, like portage.
Shipping, right.
Portage, where they carried the canoes around the whitewater.
There you go.
Cabotage, carriage between the capes.
So it generally means shipping cargo, the
Yes,
business of shipping
but
cargo.
also, since it originally was a maritime term, it is now a broadly used term throughout transportation.
So it could mean flying cargo.
There's aviation cabotage
There you go.
that applies to cargo, aviation cabotage that applies to
Okay.
to passengers.
So to go back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, in the specter of the sinking of the Lusitania, at a time in the early part of the 20th century, there were some real military, defense, security issues that were part of the background.
What happened is the war effort took up the available U.S. flag ships, and much of the coastal shipping was not, the demand was not being met. So the government did allow some foreign shipping into the U.S. coastal trades. After the war, when the requisitioned ships returned to regular service, then they tightened up the regulations, the cabotage regulations, with the Merchant Marine Act of 1920.
Now, as we move beyond the specter of the war, what were the economic reasons for keeping the Jones Act in place?
Well, the intention of the Jones Act is in the preamble of the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, and it was to support, develop, and encourage growth in the marine industry.
Okay, so
it's never quite realized that. There's only one time where we had a huge explosion of our maritime industry, and that was during World War II and shortly thereafter, with people like Henry J. Kaiser, who pioneered the construction of ships using production line techniques.
So basically you're saying that the measure was enacted and maintained in order to strengthen the American shipping industry capacity, the building of ships in our country. But as you pointed out, if we look historically from that period of time to the present, we've seen a straight line decline in the shipping industry.
Probably not a straight line, but it's never fulfilled its intent.
How big was the United States shipbuilding industry for non-military vessels back in 1920? What percentage would you guess?
I don't really know how big it was. Just after World War II, it was quite large.
Quite large.
Yeah.
But how about now, today, let's say at the beginning of the 21st century?
If you look at the shipbuilding industry in the United States today, you need to look at least two different segments of the market. There are what are known as the major shipbuilding yards that build the large commercial ships and large naval vessels. And that's a very restricted number of shipyards building a very few vessels per year. Besides that, you've got a huge number of, not a huge, but you've got a large number of yards that build tugs and barges. And the tug and barge industry in the United States is very active and can be quite competitive.
But what I understand is in terms of the deep bottom vessels, the ones that really are used in
the deep draft or ocean-going ships.
We really produce a small fraction of those vessels that are used
on a worldwide basis. Yeah, we since 1992, we've built on average 2 deep draft ships, self-propelled ships per year.
Before we take a break, any other argument used for the defense of the Jones Act?
Oh, sure. One is to defend the U.S. jobs.
Okay.
And to protect the U.S. jobs and to protect U.S. shipbuilding.
So military, shipbuilding, and then jobs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The national defense. There's 2 categories there. One is called sea lift.
All right.
And that means the ability to carry cargoes to support overseas military actions, materiel. And the second one is to maintain an industrial or the shipbuilding industrial base.
Okay, so these are some of the reasons that have been offered for the defense of the Jones Act, and I might add one other. In Hawaii in particular, the Jones Act helps to nurture industries, particularly the industries that control shipping, Matson and Horizon, as well as the unions related to them. And we'll talk about that and see to what extent the Jones Act actually accomplishes its goal and whether there are some side effects. I'm Keli'i Akina today talking with Michael Hansen, the president of the Hawaii Shippers Council. We both are working with Grassroots Institute of Hawaii in efforts to bring a new look at the Jones Act and the future of shipping for Hawaii and the nation. We're grateful to ThinkTech Hawaii for today's program. Ehana kako, and we'll be right back after this brief break. Welcome back to Ehana kako, which means working together on the broadcast network of ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of Grassroots Institute. Today, we're talking about why Hawaii shippers are screaming about the Jones Act. My guest today is an expert on the subject, president of the Hawaii Shippers Council, Michael Hansen, and my good friend. Mike, we were just talking a little bit about the rationale for the Jones Act, and you mentioned it was for national defense originally, along with protecting our shipping industry, protecting jobs related to the shipping industry and so forth. And there have been defenses for that. What are some of the more contemporary defenses for the Jones Act? Maybe even some you hear in Hawaii?
Sure. Well, it was also the Jones Act was part of the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. And one of in the preamble of that act, it explains the purpose of it. And one of the primary purposes was to promote the U.S. maritime industry.
Well, how well has the Jones Act actually promoted the maritime industry in its nearly 100 years of existence?
It struggled to accomplish that.
Okay, that sounds charitable.
It has really never lived up to its billing in terms of the preamble and what people were intending for it to do. And it's because it became such a restrictive system. And to paraphrase Lord Acton, protectionism.
Do you mean Lord Acton's power corrupts?
Yeah, power corrupts. Yeah, protectionism corrupts, and absolute protectionism corrupts absolutely.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that word, because I wanted to ask you a little bit about how well it has actually nurtured and built the shipbuilding industry here in our country. And everyone recalls back in the days of Detroit when we had strong protectionism, tariffs that were put against cars like Hondas and Toyotas and so forth. And we nearly destroyed our own capacity to build quality cars, something that was very much American industry from the time of Henry Ford. And we saw that protectionism itself, a strong, heavy hand of the federal government, ostensibly for the purpose of protecting an industry, cuts out competition. And the elimination of competition makes an industry sag in terms of its effectiveness and ultimately harms the industry itself. Is that what's happened?
Yeah, exactly. Protectionism anywhere in the world has never worked. So this is one of the major problems that the U.S. maritime industry is facing, is that it's been so protected for so long, it's no longer entrepreneurial.
And currently, less than 1% of the deep bottom ships built every year are built in the United States.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm talking about 1% of the tonnage of these ships.
Right. Even on a number basis, I think that would be correct as well.
Isn't it true that Japan built over 70 vessels in a recent year, and in the same year, the United States built 2 of these deep bottom vessels?
Yeah. Japan typically builds something on the order of about 200 ships per year.
Okay, so
and this is essentially for what they call export. So they're exporting these ships to ship owners in other countries.
How about South Korea? Do you know how many they build?
I don't know offhand, but it's larger than the number for Japan.
And China?
China is the 3rd largest builder of ships in the world today, and their production is not as great as the other 2.
So this law, the Jones Act, which was enacted to protect our shipbuilding capacity, has actually seen its decimation during the tenure of the act.
Exactly.
And we build such a tiny amount. Now, do we have problems with shortage because of that? Since the law requires Jones Act ships to be used between American ports, do we have enough to carry out the industry we need?
This is one of the major problems. We actually have an artificial scarcity of deep draft ships in the coastal, intercoastal, and non-contiguous trades of the United States, because ships are so hard to come by for domestic purposes. Being built in the United States means that they're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 times what a comparable ship would cost you from either South Korea or Japan. And this constricts the supply of ships. And when you talk about the competitiveness, in the past 20 years, all of the deep draft commercial ships that have been constructed in the United States have been built under license to a foreign shipyard. We're no longer designing these ships. These ships are American shipyards, when they get an order for a commercial vessel, go to a foreign shipyard, get the design, and with CAD/CAM now, you get a program, and that basically directs your metal cutting machines to do what they need to do.
Now, we're collecting stories at the Grassroot Institute of how the Jones Act has impacted industry across the country, not only in areas surrounded by water like Hawaii and Guam, but also the coasts on the east and west coast, and inland as far as Missouri. And recently, a shipper. We call him a shipper, of course, because he wants to use shipping, but you wouldn't traditionally think of him as a shipper. Owners of forests that cut wood and supply wood in the Northeast attempted to get that wood to Cuba, but couldn't get a ship because they just weren't available.
Well,
as a result,
it should be to go to Cuba.
Well, it wasn't available at any cost-effective level.
But Cuba is not is a foreign country, so it's the foreign trade. So that should not have been a problem. It may have been a problem because they couldn't get the export license.
I'm not quite sure what the problem was, but I do know that
because the trade with Cuba is restricted.
They ended up sending the lumber by truck down to Florida, and then to Cuba. So this is a very interesting situation.
They should have been able. Anyway, that's. For example, there's a major problem now, especially on the east coast of the United States, with shortages of petroleum products. And there are, and this is, and also in terms of the movement of crude oil. With U.S. production increasing of crude oil and petroleum products, there's a greater need for domestic transportation of these. And for example, one 50,000 deadweight ton products tanker known as the American Phoenix, which she's about 3 years old now, She was just hired out to Exxon on a time charter basis, which is sort of a technical term, I guess, but at $100,000 per day. And,
Incredible.
Yeah, and an equivalent foreign flagship would hire out at around $12,500 a day. So that's you can look at the differences.
Sure.
And it's certainly some of that is crewing cost.
Now,
but the major component, the person that let the ship American Phoenix to Exxon, this happened earlier this month, had taken the ship under time charter at $50,000 a day, and within 6 months turned around and relet the ship for $100,000 a day, which are just astronomical prices. And the reason that the ship is going for so much is that there's just a simple shortage of Jones Act qualified ships.
All right. Well, we're seeing some of the effects of this
Sure.
protectionism.
Yeah, and this is the same problem that was addressed in the Government Accountability Office study and report on the Puerto Rico trade. And the GAO concluded that there was a shortage of ships, U.S. Jones Act ships, to cover the bulk shipping requirements in Puerto Rico. And this includes tankers and dry bulk carriers.
It seems obvious then that the intention of the Jones Act hasn't been accomplished in terms of nurturing and building a shipbuilding and industry. And we're going to take a break in a few moments.
And it's had a tremendously impactful on the other industries that need transportation, economical water transportation.
And when we come back, Michael, let's then talk not only about how the Jones Act has not accomplished its purposes, but some of the harms to our economy nationwide, harms to regions that are surrounded by water, such as Puerto Rico, and in particular, harms to Hawaii. This is Keli'i Akina. This is a program we call a Hana Kako on the broadcast network of ThinkTech Hawaii. My guest today is Michael Hansen, and we're talking about, why Hawaii shippers are screaming about the Jones Act. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako on the broadcast network of ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of Grassroot Institute. My guest today, Michael Hansen, and I are talking about why shippers should be screaming, I think they should be, about the Jones Act and seeking a better future for the Jones Act and shipping in Hawaii and across the world. I've got Michael Hansen, president of the Hawaii Shippers Council, with me. Michael, let's, in this final section, talk about some of the harms. What is so bad about the Jones Act's impact upon Hawaii in particular?
Sure. The Jones Act creates an artificial scarcity of ships.
Okay.
And in the United States, we have a pretty competitive tug and barge industry. But what we're really looking at are the deep sea ocean-going ships.
How has that impacted our economy?
That carry the majority of the cargo
Sure.
in the Hawaii trade. There's at least two sides to this. One is the bulk shipping side, where there's a definite shortage of ships to cover the requirements, and this has led to a shrinking of certain sectors of the Hawaii economy.
So it drives up prices, or the cost of having anything shipped here,
Well,
as well as shipped out.
It's actually eliminated industries here.
So-
and the primary example of that would be the animal husbandry industry.
right.
And at one time, we had quite a vibrant
You know, we had
animal-
ranching as well. And
animal.
on the
Yeah,
Big
but
Island.
we had pigs,
Pigs.
chickens, eggs,
Uh-huh.
and we had a feedlot here for cattle. But what happened is there was a need to bring feed grains
Right.
and also wheat in bulk from the U.S. mainland to Hawaii to continue these industries. And there just were no Jones Act vessels available to do this.
Because the scarcity of these ships.
Exactly. And the cost of constructing one of these ships, the basic reason that they're scarce is because they cost so much to build in a U.S. shipping yard, as opposed to having them built in a foreign
And
place.
I've read estimates of between 4 and 8 times more expensive in the U.S. What do you think it
it's
is?
4 to 5.
4 to 5 times.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and that has a huge impact on what's going to happen. Say, for example, we no longer have a feed mill here in Hawaii, and we lost most of our chicken industry. The egg industry is on its sort of last legs, and now we export young cattle to the West Coast for feeding, as opposed to feeding them here.
And that's because of the cost of bringing feed in.
Yes, and,
Now-
and the kinds of ships that do that are dry bulk carriers. There's one business left here called Hawaiian Flour Mills, HFM, but they bring wheat in bulk from Canada on foreign flag bulk carriers to get around the Jones Act. They would much prefer to bring cargo from the U.S. because they can get a wider variety of products.
What about some of the items that we price out of being able to use, such as liquid natural gas? There are a lot of arguments that could be a big part of our solution.
LNG is something that's on the horizon. It would help HECO bring down prices considerably on the electricity side, which would be a great benefit to our economy.
So how does the Jones Act impact our ability to get LNG at a reasonable price now?
Well, yeah, there's two. We could bring LNG in from Canada on a foreign flag LNG carrier, or we could bring in LNG from the U.S. West Coast on a U.S. flag carrier. But the Jones Act requires that ship be built in the United States.
Now, how many ships currently under the Jones Act are qualified to carry large quantities of LNG?
Zero.
Doesn't it? Zero, really?
Yeah.
Because of the technology, the pressurization, the containerization, we have 0 ships under the Jones Act right now?
We built the U.S. built a number of LNG carriers back in the 1970s under a special U.S. government program that they were all subsidized.
So the implication
But
here...
we have
yes.
not built one since.
All right. And so the Jones Act not only directs prices such as things that get shipped to Hawaii, but it also affects the entire market that energy is related to, such as the producers of LNG.
And animal husbandry. There are enormous downstream effects.
And this is a nationwide impact then, because LNG comes from fields in Texas and
but
elsewhere.
on the mainland, natural gas is transported primarily by pipeline.
Right, it
So-
is, but in terms of it being able to be sent to places like Hawaii or Guam or Puerto Rico and so
Right,
forth,
but see,
we're severely restricted.
the big export terminals that are being planned for the United States, exporting LNG, are intended to export the LNG to foreign places, primarily to Asia, where the prices are the highest.
So Hawaii's prices will remain high because of the inability to bring in LNG.
Well, there's two, that's correct. But if there's, as this LNG scenario develops, there's two options. You can either source the LNG from Canada. There's at least two export plants that are being planned currently for the west coast of Canada, and they can come on foreign flag ships. But those Canadian exporters are going to sell at what they call Pacific Rim prices. That means you're going to pay Tokyo price for that LNG. Now, if you buy it from the U.S. West Coast, you can buy it at closer to a Henry Hub price. The Henry Hub is the standard natural gas price for the United States.
Well, recently, in 2013, on January the 1st, Bloomberg Online Journal quoted a figure. I don't know what the source of that figure is. I wonder what you think about it. It said that Hawaii's prices are 30% higher because of the Jones Act. Do you remember that article that came out? And
Yes,
I don't know what the source is, and I don't know whether that's an exaggeration or not. What are your thoughts about that?
It's very hard to quantify. I don't think it's
We
that
don't
high.
have the research yet.
I don't think it's that high. But I think in terms of what the downstream effects have been, where we've lost entire industries, where we're all paying huge amounts for electricity, and that could be alleviated through different means. That these downstream effects are significant.
Well, obviously, there's a need for greater research into the Jones Act, and this is something the Grassroots Institute is collaborating with research centers elsewhere in the United States in order to generate some economic models. In addition to that, we obviously need to help the public to become more aware. And Michael, your efforts at Hawaii Shippers Council, I think, are just tremendous, because anytime anything hits the news, you are distributing that, and we're doing that with you in Grassroots. But what I'd like to do is talk with you just a little bit about where we go from now. We can complain about the Jones Act, certainly, and we need to, actually. There's much, much more work that needs to be done to bring this into the public eye. But what solutions are out there on the table right now?
Yeah, just before we get into that,
Yes.
I'd like to mention the fact we discussed the bulk shipping side.
Yes.
And also that affects the carriage of dry bulk cargoes such as grain, and also liquid bulk cargoes such as petroleum products. And those are all affected by Jones Act pricing. In addition to that, there's the container shipping market that's represented by Matson and Horizon Lines. And for example, Matson has announced earlier this year that they want to build two new
ships,
container ships of 3,000 TEU capacity. And they're talking about paying $200 million a piece for each ship. That same ship, that ship will be designed by either a Japanese or a South Korean shipbuilding yard and built under license in the United States. That would be the intention. That same ship could be ordered directly from the people who originally designed the ship for $40 million.
Well, and that's an incredible difference in price.
Yeah, and that cascades all the way down to the consumer.
Well, your case is a strong case, but what we need is more specific econometric modeling. But I want to get to solutions. What are some of the solutions that are out there for revisioning the Jones Act?
Yeah, what we've proposed is an exemption to the U.S. build requirement from the Jones Act.
And that's one of 4 requirements in the Jones Act. So it doesn't dismantle it completely.
Absolutely. Yeah, it leaves almost everything in place except for the build requirement. And what we're saying is that this exemption would only apply to the non-contiguous trades, that is Alaska, Guam, Hawaii, and Puerto
Okay.
Rico.
So
So
this-
we're not talking about changing anything in the coastal trade.
This more moderate reform, I could see right at the front end, could be a little more politically feasible in Hawaii. And in fact, you have some experience with that. You were part of Representative Gene Ward's efforts in a recent legislative session
Right.
here to get a bipartisan support. Well, how did that turn out
It went fairly well.
for a resolution?
For a resolution. Essentially, we helped. We worked with Gene's office, and Gene got the support of 3 Democrats and 1 additional Republican, and it was introduced. No hearing was held, though. Apparently, the Jones Act interests crushed our ability to, or quashed
Okay.
our ability to have a hearing.
And those interests would be the shipping companies such as Matson and Horizon. They would be the unions that may support this. They might be the leading political
Right.
party as well. Is that what you're talking about?
Sure. The primary source of the support comes, of course, from the shipping companies. And it seems kind of counterintuitive that a company like Matson or Horizon wouldn't support an exemption which would allow them to buy a much less expensive vessel.
But you did get 3 Democrats to sign on
Yes.
the board, and that's quite historic because this
That is,
used to
yeah.
be lockstep one-party issue. Interestingly, though, you didn't get all the Republicans to
No.
sign on board.
We actually got, well, I mean, there's far more Democrats in the House than there are Republicans, so, numbers are probably in their favor. I mean, are obviously in their favor. But
Well, and the reason I'm pointing this out is it seems as though while your modest reform has some political capacity, it's not a political issue. What is the reason that legislators who supported a call for a reform stood with that? What motivated them? It wasn't a party telling them to do it.
oh no. Yeah.
So what motivated them?
I think they genuinely understood the issues
Okay.
and wished to see a change.
And that's the reason we're working together in Grassroots Institute with you, because we're looking for a nonpartisan solution that is based upon doing good for the economy of Hawaii.
Sure.
And I know you're committed to that as well. Now, there are some other options out there, such as a suit in federal court, for example, to go for a rescinding of or an exemption of the Jones Act for non-contiguous states and so forth.
Yes.
And that would be at the opposite end. And there also are there some congressional bill measures at the United States
Well, the
Congress.
For example, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, Senator McCain put in a bill to repeal on a nationwide basis the Jones Act. It wasn't a very serious bill, and I think he did it in a fit of pique. Yes.
Okay.
But it's repeal of the Jones Act would set the coastal shipping market into disarray.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to do something on a nationwide basis, then you should probably approach it not on a repeal basis, but on a replace basis.
One of the things that we've done in Grassroots Institute is not lock ourselves into any one proposal per se. In fact, I think having a specific proposal might be a little bit premature. What we're trying to do is empower those who are working to tell the public about the Jones Act, tell the public what's wrong with it, and to get a shifting tide, empower us to work together. And so I'm very grateful for your partnership in doing that, because you represent a very, very reasonable way of looking at bringing change about in Hawaii.
Sure.
Any last word? We've got a minute left with our audience here.
It's probably worth mentioning that the resident commissioner from Puerto Rico, that is the non-voting delegate from Puerto Rico to Congress, Pedro Pierluisi, intends to introduce Jones Act reform legislation for the Puerto Rico trade sometime later this month.
Yes, and I think we'll have a program when we talk about international and other aspects of looking at the Jones Act, as well as Puerto Rico and its case. One of the things that we want to do at Grassroots Institute is encourage change in Hawaii for the better. One of the most important areas is education. Giving parents, giving students the best options in education is important. I want to invite you to consider coming on July 30th to Milton Friedman's birthday. He'll be watching from heaven, of course, and we're going to be celebrating it here. Our guest speaker is Joe Trippi, a well-known Democrat political consultant, who is going to be speaking on the topic, School Reform is Not a Partisan Issue. That's July 31st for the 101st birthday of Milton Friedman, and we want to promote better schools. Before I go, you can get information at Grassroots Institute, that's singular, grassrootsinstitute.org. My guest today has been Michael Hansen of the Hawaii Shippers Council. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you, Keli'i, for the opportunity.
This has been a Hana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. My thanks to Jay Fidel for being the master grand editor, producer, and everything the show needs, and bringing to Hawaii's people information on a better future for all of us. Much aloha, till next time.